The Yew Bend by Katie Merchant. Electricity vibrated through Shanann's being, making her glow behind the ears as a tender shift in wind brought Theodore's delicate aroma to her attention. He had arrived every day at dusk like clockwork. She eased into her pool in the small alcove she had magically woven long ago beneath the tangled roots of a behemoth yew. Admiration spread across her face as she peeked into her handheld mirror, fiddling with her augmented appearance to make sure her eyes, usually toad green, displayed the brightest pigments of the clearest water. Her hair was next. She interlaced kelp in a way that gave her silver mop the most fashionable beach flair. She snapped her fingers, and her nose popped out, the illusion becoming the ideal from the front of the current papers. Vanity was her first offense to distract from her giant fish tail. Mermaids were still a fetishized odyssey, but her crowd, like dear Mr. Theodore, did not come in pursuit of love so much as addiction to service. Bottles of fine vintage clinked as she picked through her salvage and chose a flavor she knew he would like. Alcohol was her favorite way to lull people into a peaceful stupor, and humans lost so much booze to the depths. Her friends knew she had quality goods that accompanied her magic. Shanann had a power that was not unique to mermaids, but was to humans and rarely shared. Some merfolk, not all, could sort through water's memory and transport a soul to the time and place they desire. Water embraces the soul like a cloud, their remembrance pulling the soul incorporeally to its desired time and space. But it uses water from the host's body. Humans only last about an hour before they must come back to their bodies. If they miss the timing, they are absorbed into the universe, leaving the body in the present a vegetable. Shanann would call them back when she could tell their body was edging close to dehydration. She always called them back, but it was up to them to listen. Mr. Theodore, she was sure, was getting close to ignoring that call. A bottle of port sloshed as she set it on the bar when Mr. Theodore's tall shadow blacked out the light from the large root archway into the secret cove. "Good to see you again, Theo. The usual." Shanann patted the long lounge built from the braided yew. Theo settled right in, taking off his cap, setting it on his chest, and kicking his shoes off. "Yes, please." He closed his eyes and smiled. "Send me back to her, dear." He patted her hand as she passed him the drink. He downed it and was soon chittering about the youth and their lack of knowledge in the workforce. She smirked and nodded where appropriate, but before long he was peacefully on the edge of sleep, which is where her magic worked. She began to sing a song that tickled water into action and swept the man's essence into the past. Once again, Theodore was face to face with his wife, Annalise. She could not see him, but he was in the moment. The sunshine hit her face, and her rosy lips pulled into the brightest smile. Shanann watched Theodore sleep in her watery grotto, a smile playing across his handsome lips. A regular barfly tried to gain entry, but she shooed him away. She was busy fulfilling dreams. Theodore's wife had died 6 months before, and he had declined rapidly until he found Shanann's ability. He now lived for that hour a day. Shanann thought it was sad a man with so much vitality should feel so lost from losing his partner. He was not young, but he still had more decades before him than behind him. Shanann hoped he found peace. Theodore watched his wife, not through his own recollections, but through the parts of her he never got to see. How she tended to the children while he was at work, how she cried when he was cruel, how she would twirl through the house singing. Singing! He had known she was beautiful, and he had been awful. He wanted to cry, but in vapor form, he could do little more than swirl his emotions back within. The small cuckoo clock Shanann had been gifted began to make its mocking call. She looked at Theo and noted that his lips had cracked anew, and red was present but did not flow. Her song began on a shrill, high-pitched vibrato, and water carried the tune to Theodore. Theodore was too busy watching his wife breathe love and affection into their children through tickles. Grown children who were now too busy to see him. His heart would burst from joy if he could just exist forever in the feeling of all-encompassing love. Then he heard it. The siren's call. He didn't want to leave. Her tone became more pleading, a horrid cry of need. He ignored her. How could he leave this? Her. The song continued. His body smiled. The melody turned into what he thought was an enraged screech. Why should he follow her call, his last shield against the waves of the Vale? For 10 minutes she waited. No vitality returned. Shanann screamed with glee and hooked her hungry hands around the man's torso, dragging him to the depths. The sea's blues changed to deep green as she descended to a special overcropping of rock. "I'm home," she called through the large sandstone archway. "I need help hauling in supper." The 3 smaller versions of her reached through the crack, each glowing beneath the gills. "It's so fresh," the smallest called in delight. "I've been angling this one for months. Wife died, poor guy," she said with a shrug before shoving their meal into the bowels of the earth. At least he found peace. "I call the big toes," the oldest child called. "Not fair," the middle pouted. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to listen to my demented little story. If you did like it, please make sure to like, subscribe, or share, or comment, or do whatever it is just to help get things seen. Thank you.